At one point, you report several people close to Thomas told ProPublica they believed that it was implausible the justice would ever retire early, and that he may have exaggerated his concerns to bolster the case for a raise. What do you make of that? I mean, they've made this argument that he was just looking for to bolster a case for a raise. But I mean, this is, again, it's not like this is an internal issue, right? Like, this is a public policy question. Maybe it would have been untoward for the justices to come out publicly to do that, but it's not inconceivable that if you really wanted to make it like a raise situation, like that was the most important thing. It's, I mean, it's not inconceivable. You get a 25% raise, which would be, basically the equivalent of $400,000 total at that point. But you would say, it seems to me, if it was you're advocating for a raise, you would be able to pick up the phone and call the judiciary, somebody you knew on the judiciary. You don't even have to know them. You're a Supreme Court justice, and say, you should have hearings and maybe have a statement from the Supreme Court. Like, had it been about a raise, there would have been a more sort of like public policy style debate about this, it seems to me, right? Or no?
I mean, yeah. I mean, to be clear, what these people were saying was essentially that they didn't think Thomas meant it when he said he might step down, and he might not have. I mean, he apparently likes to tell people he, wants to die on the court. And so maybe he was calculating, they were saying that, by raising this threat, this, the specter of losing this conservative icon, it would get a little more juice into his push to get more money, which it did. It scared.
Well, that's my
people.
point. Is it?
Right.
There's a raise for your job, and then there's all of a sudden, I have a lot of really wealthy friends who are offering to buy my mom a house, to pay for my essentially adopted child's private school, to send me on trips, to put me on private jets. I mean, presumably we know about this stuff now. A lot of it we didn't know until you guys did this reporting. Theoretically, there could be other stuff out there we don't know about. But there's a difference between a raise from my job and all of a sudden I have just a bunch of benefactors. Yeah. And lucky, what a stroke of luck. And I should also add, when did Ginni Thomas start getting these jobs that she has, working for the Heritage Foundation or Hillsdale and all of these conservative organizations that have paid her a very significant salary over the years?
Yeah, that was right around this time. She was a Hill staffer for most of the 90s, but in the late 90s, she left to start working for Heritage, and then bounced around to Hillsdale, eventually started her own consulting company, which...
Has that been successful?
It's a complete black box. It's one of the great ways that the federal disclosure laws are set up is that since she made it an LLC, we know nothing about it. We don't know how much money went in. We don't know who she's worked for. The Post had a great story, if people haven't read it, earlier this year, about how Leonard Leo from the Federalist Society kind of had this directed, I think it was another $25,000 to Ginni. And he arranged it in this way so that there'd be no fingerprints to him or to his organizations on that payment. And in the memo or email where he was directing this money to go to her, he said, no mention of Ginni, of course.
Well, this is also around the time I just was reminded that and you talked about the disclosures of some of this in the piece, that basically, I think around 2004, the LA Times reported on some of the things that Thomas had disclosed about the gifts that he'd received from wealthy benefactors. And the lesson he took from that LA Times story in around 2004, if my recollection serves me, was, oh, I'm just going to still keep taking the gifts, but I'm just going to stop disclosing it.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't know what, I mean, it's actually right around this period. It's a little earlier than that LA Times piece that we start seeing undisclosed gifts. It's around the year 2000 that there's the first luxury vacation that we know about that didn't make it into his disclosure forms. And in the 90s, when he was doing, when he was going on trips like this, as far as we know, he was telling the public. But right around this period where this conversation happened, he goes to Russia on Harlan Crow's private jet and goes on this cruise on his yacht through the Baltics. And other stuff like that is starting to happen too. And how he made that decision to stop disclosing these things is completely unclear.
There's a lot of really odd coincidences about the sequencing of this stuff, Josh. He broadcasts to everybody in the conservative movement that he's has an income deficiency, and then suddenly, luckily for him, his wife gets a job at a conservative think tank, which leads to other things, and he starts meeting all these people. I guess it takes a couple of years before you settle in at work until you start meeting like some of your new friends, I guess, and get paid. I mean, is there any, do you know how much of this may come up in the context of, I mean, I know the last I heard from the Senate Judiciary was that they were going to subpoena Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo. I don't know if they're going to decide to show up, frankly. But I wonder how much of this reporting, if you have any of awareness, is being looked at by at least the Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee, because this timeline is, like I say, either just shockingly coincidental or very, very damning. And it really does just seem to be like, basically, let's make sure this guy doesn't quit and he's happy, he's complaining, needs more money, and we're just going to deliver it through outside sources.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the next steps are for the Senate investigation. I mean, they have been trying for months now to get a more comprehensive accounting of these gifts, and rather than what me and a couple colleagues were able to find. And so far, Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo have both stonewalled them. The subpoenas really change, I think, that calculus. Certainly, at least until relatively recently, most people were very afraid to play around with a Senate subpoena. Although, with the current kind of partisan political environment, they might, as you said, they might be able to just blow it off, essentially. And I mean, I think, important thing to underscore here is that this is, I think the root issue in all of this is that the Supreme Court, has less oversight, less accountability, less rules about ethics than really just about any other part of the federal government. And, most places there would be processes for finding this out, and it also simply would not be allowed.
Well, just before we let you go, what do you feel like is the next piece of this puzzle that we might hear about?
We're still actively reporting on all fronts. I mean, and on 9 justices too, because Thomas has, as far as we know, doing this at a scale that is, kind of well beyond what any of the other justices are, but we don't know what we don't know. And in terms of how this all unfolded, and how we got to, where we are right now, we still have more questions than answers, and are very much trying to answer them.
Josh Kaplan, reporter of ProPublica, great piece. We will link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.